Has Lara Trump ever served in government or run for election? No. But sure, it's definitely her experience and not her last name that could win her the job. It's Tuesday, December 10th. I'm Jane Coaston, and this is What A Day, the show that is polarized about Merriam-Webster deciding that polarization is the word of the year. Some of us are supportive of this decision, and some of us are very, very angry about it. And I feel like there's a divide between us on this. I wonder what that's called. On today's show, Bitcoin is spiking, and Trump is filling the White House with crypto enthusiasts. What does that mean for the future of American currency? And Biden is asked to commute the sentences of federal death row inmates. Let's get into it. TikTok's days may be numbered. A federal appeals court on Friday upheld a law that could ban the app in the U.S. TikTok argued that such a ban would violate users' right to free speech. But the three-judge panel disagreed and maintained that TikTok must divest from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, or lose its U.S. market. On Monday, TikTok asked an appeals court not to enforce the ban until the Supreme Court decides whether or not they want to take the case. TikTok also argued that delaying enforcement would give President-elect Donald Trump and his administration more time to clarify if they are pro-ban or want to keep the app, because right now, it's kind of unclear. We've talked on the show before about how Trump tried banning TikTok during his first term in office. He was 100% on board with all the lawmakers who said China is using TikTok to spy on Americans. But on the campaign trail, he changed his tune entirely and promised that he would not let a nationwide ban go into effect. During Trump's interview with NBC's Meet the Press earlier this week, host Kristen Welker asked Trump if he plans to keep that promise. But in true Trump form, his answer was all over the place. Listen for yourself.
And I use TikTok, so I can't really, I can't totally hate it. It was very effective. But I will say this, if you do that, something else is going to come along and take its place. And maybe that's not fair. What they're doing, and really what the judge actually said was that you can't have Chinese companies. In other words, they have the right to ban it if you can prove that the Chinese companies own it. That's what the judge actually said.
So are you going to try to protect TikTok, just very quick, once you're in office?
I'm going to try and make it so that other companies don't become an even bigger monopoly.
Okay.
Because that's what happens.
I do not know what that means. I wanted to talk to someone who could run through the possibilities of what comes next. So I called up Louise Matsakis. She's a longtime tech reporter and the senior business editor at Wired. Louise, welcome back to What A Day.
Hey, how's it going?
With regard to this case, was this ruling the expected outcome?
I think before this all started, absolutely not. I think the idea of blocking a major social media platform in the United States was sort of an unheard of idea. However, recently, yes, this was expected because during the oral arguments, it seemed like the panel of judges were already sort of leaning in this direction, and they were very sympathetic to the national security arguments that were being made by Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice.
I want to get into those national security concerns because I feel like I've heard two different versions. One is the kind of more fear-mongering, they're making things trend to make Americans into bad people. But then I've also heard the idea that the Chinese government is using the app to surveil users. Can you tell us if there's any merit to that claim? Does the federal government actually have any evidence that the Chinese government is using the app to surveil users or influence them in some way?
The answer is no. I do not think that there is any public evidence, at least, that the Chinese government is using this app in particular in order to surveil Americans. There have been no reports of that specifically in terms of like widespread, data collection. And I think it's important to note that that's not because the Chinese government is benevolent, but because there's a lot of other avenues where they can get the sorts of data that they're interested in, right? There's a lot of reporting right now about how the Chinese government has been accused of hacking a number of major telecom providers in the US. So that would probably give them a lot more information about patterns of communication, the phone numbers and maybe addresses and maybe other data of the types of people that they're interested in. So it's not that this hacking isn't happening, but there's no public knowledge that it's happening through TikTok specifically.
It looks like the case is headed for the Supreme Court. TikTok has asked that the federal government hold off on enforcing the ban until the justices weigh in. The court's conservative supermajority is known to rule in favor of free speech, but this is a little different, especially when you bring in those national security concerns. Do we expect the high court to rule in favor of TikTok?
I think everything is on the table. I think that these are judges who have definitely shown that they believe in sort of a wide breadth of free speech rights and sort of, leaning in that direction. However, historically, including in the ruling we just saw on Friday, courts give a lot of leeway to national security arguments, and they also give a lot of leeway to the executive branch. There could be, a number of avenues that could open up for, President-elect Donald Trump to potentially do something here. So we could sort of see a mixed ruling where, some parts of the law are upheld and then other parts of the law are able to go forward. What was interesting to me about the ruling on Friday was how the court said that, the First Amendment gives you the right to ensure that your free speech is not infringed upon by the U.S. government. But what they said was that what this law did was infringing on the free speech of a foreign platform, of a Chinese-owned platform. So it's sort of like this idea that the First Amendment is not a global right and that it's not protecting the rights of Chinese companies or foreign companies. There's a lot of different ways that the court could interpret that. And I wouldn't make bets either way.
Let's say TikTok loses again. Can someone still buy the app to satisfy the DOJ? Has anyone shown any interest?
Yes, I would say one of the people making the most noise right now about wanting to buy the app is a real estate investor named Frank McCourt. And there's been some reporting that he's raised about $20 billion to potentially buy it. However, the question really is whether or not ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, would really want to sell it or be able to. When this issue first came up 4 years ago, when Trump first tried to ban the app, the Chinese government signaled that they wouldn't allow this sort of sale to go through. And I don't think that there's really any indication that that's necessarily changed. But yeah, a number of people like McCourt have sort of raised their hand and said, hey, I'll take it. But whether that sale is realistic, I think is an entirely different question.
You mentioned just a moment ago that Trump tried to ban TikTok during his first presidency. There was a lot of conversation among Republicans about how TikTok was very dangerous for some of the reasons that I mentioned a little earlier. We've talked on the show before about how Trump flip-flopped on this completely. And he's promises to save the app if he's elected, and he has been. What could he do to reverse the ban once he's inaugurated?
So one of the things that he could do is he could decline to enforce the law. So even if the law stays and the Supreme Court decides to uphold it, he could basically just say, I'm not going to go after Google if they continue hosting TikTok in their app store. I'm not going to come and try and shut down TikTok's headquarters in Los Angeles. However, he would potentially then be violating another law, which basically says that presidents need to continue to uphold the laws that have already been passed. So that's why we don't have a situation where when a new president is elected, they just say, oh, forget all these other laws that have already existed. I don't care about those, right? It's potentially possible that he could then get in trouble for ignoring a law that is considered the will of the people and that Congress overwhelmingly voted to pass.
That January 19th deadline is coming up very quickly. If TikTok doesn't divest from ByteDance, does that mean the app just disappears from our phones? Can we not download it anymore? What happens?
So the app won't necessarily disappear from your phones. The technical specifics do remain a little unclear, but what could potentially happen is that when you try to use the app from a United States IP address, it may no longer work. Apple and Google would be liable for, tens of thousands, potentially millions of dollars of fines for continuing to host the app in their app store. So that means, no new users. But it still is unclear whether or not, let's say you flew to Mexico or to Europe, whether the same app on your phone would work or if you need to download a different version. I think a lot of those questions remain really unanswered. And that's been a big source of the confusion here is and if a sale does go through, will you be on this app where there are only other Americans? Because TikTok is only being forced here to divest its US operations, right? So does that mean the creators I follow in Japan or in France or wherever, I just won't be able to see their accounts anymore, right? Those are the sorts of things that we don't really know and that certainly ByteDance is probably trying to hash out right now.
And I also want to talk briefly about the broader legal implications of banning an entire social media platform in the US. Does it set a precedent that could be used to ban other social media apps?
I think it definitely does set a precedent for banning foreign-owned platforms in the US. But what I worry about is that American platforms are dominant in most parts of the world. And so I worry about other countries saying, hey, you banned TikTok for national security reasons that were sort of vague and based on hypotheticals. Well, it's a national security risk for my authoritarian regime that people are allowed to protest on Facebook. So I'm going to ban Facebook, right? And I think that underlying hypocrisy will be really hard to argue against on the global stage.
Louise, this has been really helpful. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We'll get to more of the news in a moment, but if you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and share with your friends. More to come after some ads. What A Day is brought to you by Aura Frames. Isn't it funny how the people we love the most are often the hardest to shop for? Luckily, there's one gift that everyone on your list is sure to enjoy, an Aura digital picture frame. Wirecutter called it the best digital photo frame. I took so many photos this year, from weddings to parties to just random days I enjoyed with my husband and dog, and I cannot wait to share those with my friends and my family in an Aura frame. Save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames by using promo code WAD at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code WAD. Terms and conditions apply. What A Day is brought to you by bookshop.org. Maybe you're searching for history that helps you make sense of this moment, or a novel that takes you out of it. Bookshop.org has you covered. Bookshop.org helps foster culture, curiosity, and a love of reading for generations to come. Every purchase made directly supports local independent bookstores. Find your nearest shop with the bookstore map. Use code WAD to get 10% off your next order at bookshop.org/crooked. That's WAD at bookshop.org/crooked for 10% off. What A Day is brought to you by Rocket Money. With Rocket Money, you don't have to remember every subscription or worry about forgetting any because you can see them all laid out in the same place. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/whataday. That's rocketmoney.com/whataday. rocketmoney.com/whataday.
Headline. He is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan.
NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch announced the arrest of Luigi Mangione Monday, a suspect in the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Thompson was killed last week in Manhattan, where the company was holding an investor conference. Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after he was recognized at a McDonald's. In a press conference, New York City Mayor Eric Adams attributed the arrest to a photo of the suspect circulated by the NYPD.
We sent it across the country, and someone, a McDonald's employee, did something we ask every American to do. If you see something, say something, but most importantly, do something.
Tisch said local police officers then questioned Mangione, who was, quote, acting suspiciously.
Officers recovered a firearm on his person, as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including a mask consistent with those worn by our wanted individual.
Tisch said Mangione was carrying multiple fraudulent IDs, as well as a U.S. passport. She said police also recovered a handwritten document that, quote, speaks to both his motivation and mindset. That's a lot of things. The NYPD says the document noted, quote, ill will towards corporate America. Mangione had a preliminary arraignment in Pennsylvania Monday night, where he was formally hit with multiple charges, including forgery and carrying firearms without a license. He was ordered held without bail. Mangione is expected to face charges in New York in connection with Thompson's death. More than 100 faith groups, civil rights organizations, current and former prosecutors, and even the Pope are asking President Biden to commute the sentences of federal death row inmates before he leaves office. In letters to Biden made public Monday, groups like Human Rights Watch and the ACLU asked the president to commute all federal death sentences to life in prison without parole. They appealed to Biden's Catholic faith and the fact that he campaigned against the death penalty. The ACLU also released ads to bolster its request. They include a plea from Herman Lindsay, a former Florida death row inmate who was exonerated by the state's Supreme Court.
The weight of those years on my mind, my body, is something that I still live with every day. President Biden, this is your legacy. Commute the row.
Driving this pressure campaign on Biden right now is the fact that Donald Trump campaigned on his support for the death penalty. Trump also wants to expand the pool of crimes eligible for capital punishment. Right now, there are 40 men on federal death row. They include the surviving Boston Marathon bomber, the man who killed 9 black churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, and a gunman who killed 11 people at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is stepping down as co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She made the announcement late Sunday in a post on social media, saying she plans to formally resign at the next RNC meeting. Her co-chair, Michael Whatley, is staying on. And she's practically begging for the Senate seat that's about to be vacated by Florida Senator Marco Rubio. The president-elect picked him to be his Secretary of State pending Senate confirmation. Speaking to Fox on Sunday night, Lara Trump downplayed good old-fashioned nepotism as a factor in potentially getting that seat.
If that's something that's put in front of me, it would be a true honor. But yeah, look, I think probably my last name does heighten my political profile a little bit, but I've got a proven track record.
Has Lara Trump ever served in government or run for election? No. But sure, it's definitely her experience and not her last name that could win her the job. Once Rubio vacates the seat, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis would have the power to appoint his replacement to serve until 2026, when a special election would be held for the remainder of Rubio's term. DeSantis says he's already vetting candidates. An unnamed woman who accused Sean Diddy Combs of raping her at an awards show after-party in 2000, when she was just 13 years old, added Jay-Z to her lawsuit Sunday, saying he participated in the assault. In a statement released on Twitter, Jay-Z denied the allegations and called them a blackmail attempt. He called the plaintiff's lawyer, Tony Busby, a, quote, ambulance chaser in a cheap suit, and said the accusations amount to, quote, theatrics. Busby has filed more than 100 lawsuits accusing Diddy of sexual assault, but many of those cases have not gone forward due to his clients wishing to remain anonymous. Since Jay-Z's statement, Busby claims his family has been harassed. The woman's lawsuit alleges that Diddy and Jay-Z took turns assaulting her after she was given a drink that made her feel lightheaded. It also accuses Jay-Z of holding her down while Diddy assaulted her. These claims are part of a litany of lawsuits against Diddy that include federal sex trafficking and racketeering. And that's the news. One more thing. I have a confession to make. Despite being a smart, well-reasoned, and well-informed person, with a job that's literally telling you all about why and how stuff works and is happening, I am still not exactly sure how I feel about cryptocurrency. Honestly, I think I actually agree with President-elect Donald Trump.
Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam.
Well, to be clear, that was Donald Trump speaking with Fox Business in 2021. This is Donald Trump at a Bitcoin conference this past summer, sounding a little different.
This afternoon, I'm laying out my plan to ensure that the United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world.
Sure. The new Trump administration is full of crypto enthusiasts. Trump himself has his own crypto coin, and his sons have a crypto exchange. Bitcoin's worth is skyrocketing, and more people than ever are getting into cryptocurrencies. Like it or not, and I am not inclined to like it, crypto is going to be a major factor over the next 4 years, even if you, like me, don't own any. So I thought I'd ask Bloomberg senior editor, in front of the pod, Stacey Vanek some questions about what cryptocurrency means for everyday Americans, and also what exactly cryptocurrency is. Stacey Vanek, welcome back to What A Day.
Thanks, Jane. I'm glad to be here.
So, first of all, can you explain what is cryptocurrency? And please explain it to me as if I were a high school freshman who is usually just not thinking about cryptocurrency.
I mean, it is in certain ways incredibly simple, which is it is money that people agree is worth something and they trade it.
Okay.
Normally, the value of money comes from the government that issues it. So the United States issues the United States dollar, and all of the businesses within the country are like legally required to accept it. It's legal tender. The government sets the value. It's backed up by the U.S. economy. And so it's sort of seen as backed up by a real thing, by a country. Then there's crypto. And the interesting thing about crypto is it's not attached to any country. Obviously, the advantage is it's not, if your government collapses or there's terrible inflation or the government's trying to freeze your assets, it's separate from that. It is currency you can own yourself. The tricky part is it's hard to know like what it's backed up by. People will say, it's the blockchain. I feel like that word gets thrown around, like nobody knows what it means. It's a public record. So if I give you, part of a Jane coin, then there's a record of it. Now, how much is the Jane coin worth? That gets trickier, an infinite amount, of course. But like that gets trickier
Obviously.
because it's like, well, it's not like a country's having a good day or a bad day or a country's economy is doing badly, things that you can traditionally measure. It's more like what people are deciding it's worth on any given day. It's like vibes.
Why is it that it seems like the people who are into crypto, like talk about it all the time, are kind of bro-y and right-wing?
Well, one reason people talk about crypto all the time is that it's sort of like in Peter Pan when they're like, clap for Tinkerbell, so that she exists. I mean, the value of the cryptocurrency people have is literally dependent on how much you think it's worth. So that is why if you've ever been like backed into a corner at a party and had someone like explaining crypto to you and like why it's so amazing and the currency of the future, they have a real investment in you and everybody else believing that. So the reason that you have like kind of evangelists is that if everybody stops believing in Bitcoin will be worth nothing. And then also, I think it's a little countercultural because it is people who have a little bit of a suspicion of the government. Mm-hmm. I think the profile for people who own crypto and the profile for people who own gold is not that far off, right? Which is why I think libertarians tend to favor it. And so I think that faction of the Republican Party tends to be into crypto. People who are suspicious of government, want a small government, don't want the government controlling things.
But that's kind of funny because so many people in the incoming Trump administration are crypto bros and big fans of crypto and people who may even have minted their own coins. Does this have any implications for policy, for our personal finances, for people who are still really into the US dollar? Yay, the dollar?
Yeah. I am also really into the US dollar.
Big fan.
I'm heavily invested in it. This Trump winning the election has gotten the world of crypto very, very excited. I mean, Trump issued his own coin, the Trump coin, which peaked at 66 cents a piece, I think, and is now at 6 cents or something. But he issued his own coin, and he's been very vocal about pushing for crypto. I think part of it was motivated by money. So a lot of crypto people donated a lot of money to his campaign, and Trump seems to be delivering on it. The new head of the Securities Exchange Commission that Trump has nominated is this man, Paul Atkins, who has also been very vocal about thinking that crypto should be allowed to sort of roam freer or become kind of a bigger, freer asset than it is. More mainstream, I guess.
And what does that mean, do you think? I mean, we don't know. I don't know anything. But what does that mean for policy moving forward and for everyday Americans who might not own crypto?
This is really interesting. I mean, what you said is like very true, I think, for all of us. Like, we don't know. I think what we're going to see is the regulation come off of a lot of crypto and crypto become much more seamlessly easy to buy and sell, much more integrated in our financial system. Maybe people getting paid in Bitcoin, or, you're able to like buy Bitcoin through your bank or pay for stuff with Bitcoin more easily. I think we're likely to see that, just a greater ease of use, much more integrated into our economy and I think just into our day-to-day lives. But it's very volatile and it's not backed up by a government or an economy. And that is what scares me, I think, about crypto, is that if there's a crash and it has become so, I mean, it's one thing if like a bunch of very wealthy tech bros who back you into a corner at a party own it. It's another thing if everybody's saying like, oh, I've got to put my savings into this because some guy at a party told me I should. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden everybody's savings is gone and there's no reason why and there's no one held accountable. I don't know, that is the part that scares me. I think both the really exciting part of crypto and the really dangerous part of crypto are kind of the same.
Stacey, thank you so much. This has been very informative.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Jane. It's always good to see you.
That's all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review. Celebrate Taylor Swift ending the Eras Tour after 21 months on the road, and tell your friends to listen. And if you're into reading, and not just about how the Eras Tour raked in $2 billion and entertained 10 million people who definitely didn't make it their entire personality, like me, What A Day is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Jane Coaston, and that is so many friendship bracelets.